Hello, my name is Doreen Ellen Beldutan in Sfat in Israel. As in my last video, I apologize for the zombie epoxy lips. The geological events that are occurring in the world are impacting on my body, and I'm having various symptoms. So I'm sorry if I look the way I do, but I need to speak with you. With the arrest of Tommy Robinson, the time has come to give this information that I've been preparing the way for, with God's help, for a while. I'm going to be giving things over a little bit more deeply and revealing things a little bit more deeply. And the time has come for us to understand what's going on. I'd like to speak about the people who are called the Illuminati, what that really is, and hopefully their effects on the world will be immediately mitigated and very shortly eradicated. The Rothschild family, whose influence I am certainly not minimizing. They are very, very high-level management, and they're very capable at what they do, are important, but they are not the bosses. They are upper-level management who, like all upper-level management, have stock in the ownership, but there's a level above them, and we're going to talk about them today, because that's a Shem with God's help. There are three families with whom I wish to familiarize you a bit more and explain their significance in the world, what they're doing, and how the world we're living in is operating. The three families are Dangoor, Sassoon, or Sassoon, they're also called. Vidal Sassoon is someone from that family. He's certainly not one of the highest level operators, but yes, he is from that family. And another family called Kadoorie, who we don't hear very much about at all. These are the families who hail back to Ur-Kasdim, which is where Avraham Avinu, our father Avraham, came out from and began the monotheistic religions and enlightened the world about there being one God, and that God being good and merciful and compassionate. When Israel began to sin widespread, our prophets warned them that they were going to go into exile. What the prophets did not count on, come in and be quiet, behave nicely. What the prophets did not count on would be that there were going to be Jews who were going to return to Babylon and like it there. They thought that it was a punishment. Well, there were rabbis who went back there and they were just delighted to be in Babylon. You have heard about the Illuminati. The word Illum in Hebrew actually means hidden. The way these families spell their names gives more insight into what the light is. the dark light, I would call it. U, or is light in Semitic languages. The person who calls, the family who call themselves Dangoor are integrating that light concept into their names. An anagram of Dangoor would be Gondar, which is a very, very high level officer in the Israeli prison system, for instance. The highest ranking prisoner officers are called Gondarim. Legander is also to wear very, very fancy clothes and make much of oneself insofar as how one looks on the outside. Naim Dangoor, who gratefully is not in this world anymore, renewed a title for himself that hasn't been used since the 13th century. That title is Rosh HaGolah. Translated it into English as the Exilarch. It also has another meaning. Gal, is a pile of stones. Rosh Golah would then become the top stone in the pile of stones. That is the capstone. That's the whole thing with the capstone. Oh, like the pyramid on the American dollar bill and all that. That's what he called himself, is Rosh Golah. I'm going to be linking to some information about him. In one of the photos of him, you'll see that this nice Jewish boy is walking around with an upside-down cross pinned on him. His father was the largest seller of Arab books. His grandfather was the chief rabbi of Baghdad. Now you can call Iraq all you want, but it will always be Babylon. And these people are still connected to Babylon, and that is still their center of operations, although they're living in Britain. Another family is Sassoon. They make much ado about being connected to the Davidic dynasty. Not all of David's sons were how shall I say, morally upright. They made a fortune in the opium trade in China. And there's another family, Kadoorie. Not much is known about them. On the internet I can't find much. Maybe some people in Britain can find out more about them. These are the people who go back all the way in time to the Babylonian, Mesopotamian, Assyrian empires of dark magic. The town that Avraham came out of is called Ur-Kasdim. And in different Semitic languages, the letter Sian is sometimes pronounced as Shean. We can read Ur-Kasdim as Ur-Keshedim, which would make it the light like demons. The word shade comes from that, being in the shade. All of the Babylonian cultic practices involve blood sacrifice, most especially child sacrifice. And it still goes on. In fact, more than ever, they have gotten to a point of it being on an industrial level. And the time is coming to put a final end to that. And that is why the planet Earth now is so energetic and disquiet. We can see from the volcanoes going off, the volcano in Hawaii, there are other active volcanoes. The most active right now is the one in Hawaii. We can see that it's both an outpouring and a purification, but at the same time, it's hell on earth. This is what's going on, the very core of earth. The word core, by the way, which is kur, heart, right? Core is also a reactor, like a nuclear reactor is called a core. All of this, the heart of the earth itself is reacting and pouring out because the final confrontation between good and evil is now taking place. In order to explain to you how the learning of the Talmudic, the Babylonian Talmud, impacts on the world, it helps to know what cymatics is. I recommend a lecture in cymatics that was given at TED, as part of the TED series of lectures. I recommend the TED lecture because cymatics is really very, very important. It talks about how sound impacts on the world and forms. And immediately with information like that is revealed, the dark magicians come in and overtake it and make it kooky. I'm not interested in all that kooky stuff. I have no patience for that. When you know about God, you're not into spiritual, kooky, new age stuff. If a person can't integrate it into their ordinary life without sounding like trippy, man, they don't know what they're talking about. Anytime something talks about spirituality, you're talking about the occult. I don't do that crap. The cymatics lecture in TED talks about it from a rational, scientific, such as it is, point of view. Sound impacts on matter. Sound waves create forms. The word Talmud, meaning learning, is an anagram of the word moledet, which means land of birth. What the Babylonian magicians did was they turned the Babylonian Talmud into their moledet. They wanted to do away with the level of reality that is called Yisrael. I talked about that in my last video. I don't want to repeat in order to keep things within a reasonable framework of time. Normally I don't like to refer to Hollywood memes and this kind of stuff. I don't think that people should be pinning their real consciousness on stuff that's given over in Hollywood. But there is a scene in the movie The Matrix. It's done horribly, but the point of it is very, very important. You see a baby all plugged in, and that baby is acting as a battery producing energy. The way it really works is, from the time Jewish children are small, Jewish boys are small, they are told that they have to learn the Talmud in order to know how to do the mitzvot. Now this is arrant nonsense, because Gematria of Yisrael, Israel is ha-mitzvot. Israel is the mitzvot. So what happens if we are the actual commandments living commandments, what happens when boys are told to use their real body, their real being, to produce ceremonies? Not to just live in a holy way, but to act out ceremonies. What happens? The unreality is introduced into the creation. Understand what I'm saying now. Unreality does not necessarily exist, or even the possibility of unreality, until real Jews do fake things with their bodies, and then there is a platform for bullshit. And that is what our children are inducted into. That is the slavery that our children are made to do. To sit and learn the Talmud and provide the power for creating Babylon. We do not need to learn how to do ceremonies. Torah is not a book of ceremonies. It is the book of life. And from Torah, all worlds can be created, and that is what we are meant to know how to do. But instead, the children are taught by the rabbis who are funded by the Dangoors, by the Sassoons, by the Kadoories. These people fund education on all levels. Take a look at the links that I'm going to provide, and you'll see how deeply involved in education they are here and in Britain. And so these children learn the Talmud, and when they do, what they're pronouncing in Hebrew, and to a certain extent in Aramaic too, because it's close to Hebrew, is creating the forms of Babylon. That is the child sacrifice. But there's more to it. Instead of creating Israel, which is not a country and not a geographical place, it is a moral accomplishment, they create Babylon unknowingly. But the people that are funding these yeshivas, they know. And the rabbis, and there are photos, please look at my Facebook. These rabbis are walking around wearing crosses that says, "For God and the Empire." What? I'm sorry, this is like all filtering through my body, and it's not easy. Few days before the American embassy opened, there were very, very heavy rains here. And there was an area that was flooded where teenagers were sent to go on an excursion. 10 teenagers died there. They themselves were afraid to go. They were given warnings not to go. They were sent there. They were made to go within the framework of an army, pre-army preparation program. And they drowned. Because before the American embassy could be moved to Jerusalem, which is not the same thing as Yerushalayim, they needed blood sacrifices. All of these wars, every war, and you listen to me now, is all about blood sacrifice. That's all it is on an industrial level. Babylon is powered by misery. The sacrifice itself is more to the power, to the purpose of creating the negative power that results from mass misery. It's very interesting in the state of Israel. We're hardly ever involved in collective celebration, and when we do, it's some kind of nonsense like what happened at the Eurovision concert, right? So we should all be happy about the fact that somebody made a fool of herself in front of the whole world. We're united in national mourning all the time, and this is exactly what the Babylonian cult was. This is what it was. They used to cry about Tammuz dying, and all the women would wail and cry in misery, and there would be sacrifices and all kinds of things. Well, they don't do it that way anymore for two reasons. One, so you shouldn't recognize it for what it is. And number two, the technology now allows it to be done much more sophisticated. What that does is create the reality that we're living in. Reality does not have to look the way it is. I'll give you an example. There's a lot of talk about aliens. I'm going to tell you what all this talk about aliens is. The Hebrew word for the Most High is Elyon. There are no other planets. It only looks to us like there are other planets because we are in a state of such dissociation as a result of being told all kinds of Babylonian bullshit about what time is, about what history is, about all kinds of disassociation about, instead of being told that the people, the figures that we see in Torah are us. We're told that it's somebody else who lived long ago and far away, and total schizophrenia. So is it any wonder that we think that the light that we're seeing, which seems so far away to us because we are in such darkness, are other planets? There are no other planets. The planet that is called Jupiter in Hebrew is tzedek, which means righteousness. We were told it's another planet, so that there shouldn't be righteousness on earth. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? We are told that the sun is far away and too hot to touch and impossibly... Bullshit! That's all wisdom that we have been removed from. And all of these illusions are being created by these Babylonian warlocks and witches. And let me tell you something else too. Do not believe this crap about the men being in charge of it. It's the women in these families. Women have always had the power, for good and for bad. We give birth to everything. And if you notice in this world, there's an awful lot of women being involved in child trafficking. It's the women that are inducting people into the trafficking. It's the women selling the kids. There is no evil. There is no evil, and you listen to me now, like a woman who has no compassion. Compassion in Hebrew is rachamim, which is the plural for wombs. It is a woman who kills that which comes out of her own womb. if we are to live in a world in which being meek and gentle and kind is not dangerous, is not reason to be put in jail, is not reason to be put in mental institutions, we have to get to the root of this Babylonian cult, which is creating the platform. It creates a world in which evil is physically possible, in which it can be carried out. This is not necessarily the case. The money has to be turned off to the yeshivas where the boys are sitting and learning Talmud. I know that there's going to be a hue and cry, and it's going to be anti-Semitism, and cut off the blood supply to the machine that is creating all of the evil that is in this world. Don't worry, those boys will not stop learning Torah. They will start learning Torah. Thank you for listening.